there were definitely points in my career where I learned that I did not have the soft skills I needed to be successful. And I had a leader that I worked with once, and I won't name him because I don't want to embarrass him, but I got a performance review back for that year. Everybody gave me glowing recommendations, right? I was a 5 out of 5, all this positive feedback, except for him. And his feedback was, people love working with you on projects because you get stuff done, but no one likes working with you. And I couldn't believe it. I had all of this positive feedback. My manager thought I was great. And yet I was getting this negative feedback. So I scheduled time with him and I was like, I need to know more about the feedback you're giving. And he said, do you know that people will call you the ice queen when you're not around? You are so focused on delivering results, so focused on getting things done that you don't take time to connect with the people you're working with or to hear out their opinions. Welcome back to Secrets of a Corporate Game. So many people are trying to navigate a corporate world that is laden with secrets, cleverly hidden and unspoken rules to a game that most employees don't even know they're playing. On this podcast, we try to give you a peek behind the curtain and unveil some of those secrets with tips and tricks that you can apply today to start taking control of your career and progress up the ladder faster. I am your host, Kendall Berg, that career coach, and today we are talking about how to identify your strengths and use those strengths to propel your career forward. So this is always where I start with clients when they come in to work with me, and it's one of the things that I think in our careers we will oftentimes overlook. So the biggest thing of identifying your strengths is really building in a habit of pattern recognition. When you do great work that gets recognized over the course of your career, it tends to be because you display the same strength in different settings. So for example, maybe you have a high level of technical expertise and that is one of your main strengths. That will show up in the work that you do that gets your biggest recognition and your achievement. Same is true in my case. I offer a lot of organization in chaos. So you throw me into the areas where it is a black hole and there's no clarity whatsoever, and I can create organization, direction, processes, and get something working well. When you look at your own career, it is important to be constantly evaluating the patterns in your behavior that are leading to high levels of achievement. Sometimes this can be really hard for us to do to ourselves. We have kind of that tunnel vision where we see ourselves a certain way, and so it can be hard to break outside of that. So one of the tools that I like to use is a leadership evaluation assessment. So over the course of my studies and also of my coaching, there are essentially 20 strengths that really matter when it comes to being successful in your career. It's not to say that other things that you do won't add value or won't be contributors to the success that you find, but these 20 skills will ultimately set you apart from your peers and, from lack of a better term, your competition. So these skills are high integrity and honesty, technical and professional expertise, solves problems, analyzes issues, innovates, learning agility and self-development, drives for results, establishes stretch goals, takes initiative, communicates powerfully and prolifically, inspires and motivates others, builds relationships, collaboration and teamwork, strategic thinking, champions change, has customer and external focus, develops others, strong moral character, decision-making, risk-taking, and valuing diversity. We will put all of that in the show notes in case you didn't just memorize the 20 as I read them off. But when you think about what separates you from your peers, there are probably things in that list that as I read it out, you thought, oh, that's me. Oh, that really resonates with me. Or the flip side, that's not me, but that's something I want to be known for. So when it comes to really identifying your strengths, I like to take that list and evaluate myself on a scale of 1 to 10. 10 being, I'm exceptional at this. I do an excellent job. It is the best thing that I do. And 1 being, I never display this skill. It's not something that's really part of my repertoire or my brand. And then I like to ask 3 other people to assess me the same way. So you could send this to your boss. You could send this to your key stakeholder. You could send this to your peer. You could send this to your skip level. You could send this to somebody who works for you. And you want to get that feedback and kind of average it out. This will tell you a few things. One, it will help you identify your spikes. So what a spike is it's where your score for that particular skill is 2 to 3 points higher than the average of your others, right? So generally people tend to fall between like a 5 and a 7 on most skills. They may have a couple 8 9s and they may have a couple 2 3s, right? That's a standard distribution in this evaluation tool. What you're looking for are those 8 9s. What are those things that you do that really separate yourself? Or if your scores are 3 to 5, maybe these are your 6 7s. So you're looking for those things that are clearly identified not only by yourself, but by the people you've asked to evaluate you as something you do well relative to the other skills. Now, one of the worst possible responses you can get to this exercise is the same number for everything. It is actually worse for you to be good at everything than it is to be bad at some things and great at others. And I'll talk you through a couple of examples for that. So imagine you work with somebody who does a good job. They always turn in their work on time. They're decent at representing themselves. They can talk in meetings and ask decent questions, but they're not great at anything and they're not terrible at anything. And then put them side by side with somebody who is an amazing communicator. Every meeting that they walk into, they just hold the whole room. Everybody wants to know what they think. People are constantly reaching out to them for their opinion because they have such a high level of technical expertise. Maybe they're not so great at risk taking, so they wouldn't be in like a sales position or business development position. And they're not so great at having a customer external focus, but they are really exceptional at communication and technical expertise. If you put both of these people in the same room and you asked a hiring manager to pick who they would want, 99% of the time, they're going to pick the person who has spikes and some low skills. The reason is that they have differentiated themselves. They have a clear brand that's associated with what they're good at. They have a pattern of being able to deliver in that space. They constantly held great meetings where they're able to ask good technical questions, where they're guiding the team forward, and they've become kind of that go-to person because of their communication skills. That person's going to get chosen over the person who's good at everything every day. But this goes very counter to us because when we're in school, say you're great at math and you're terrible at English, it's not like you stop taking English. You just study more for English until your score goes up. The reality is in the professional world, it's better to pretend that English doesn't exist at all and focus on being really, really exceptional at math. And that's where college kind of starts to separate, is we start to really focus on the things that we're good at, and we start to hone those skills rather than focusing on studying everything. And that should be continuing in our corporate careers. You should build your strengths, identify what those are that separate you, and then invest in building those skills up even more. So if you've never done this exercise before, you've never had a leadership evaluation like this, feel free to take this and apply it in your own job. It is something that I think will really help you understand not only what you're good at, but the second benefit of this exercise is where your self-perception deviates from that of your leaders and your peers. So say you spiked yourself in communication and technical expertise, sticking with our example, but your boss put your spike in values diversity and mentors others. You see yourself as a great communicator, great technical expertise, but your manager actually thinks of you as not being as strong in those things, but being a really good leader. It's important to understand what brand you are building and if it's the right brand. Because maybe you do really value diversity. Maybe you are a really great leader and you like motivating others, but you're a better communicator and technical expertise. Something in the way that you're communicating your value to your boss is not landing with your strengths. So this will also help you understand where there's differing of opinion, right? Somebody who works for you may rate you really low and motivates others, but your boss may rate you really highly. Obviously, there's an issue there if the people who actually work for you don't feel motivated, but your manager feels like you're motivating them on your behalf. So this exercise provides a lot of insights into your performance. I also see that 9 out of 10, I will have clients come to me and say, hey, I got this back. My boss scored me really low, even though I've never been given negative feedback. So a lot of the times, this is a great way to understand what your manager's really thinking. Managers struggle so often with giving negative feedback. They don't want to be mean. They don't want to be rude. It's honestly easier to never give you the feedback, never promote you, and let you quit than it is to try and actually build your skills. So a lot of managers struggle with this, and they won't give you the constructive feedback that you need if you want to progress your career. Meanwhile, this exercise, because it's so numerical and it's really based on gut instinct, it's harder for managers to hide behind, oh, well, I don't want to give negative feedback. They'll just score you and think, oh, well, I gave them an 8 on this, so it's okay if I give them a 4 on this other one. And it'll show you a lot more where you have potential issues. So with that being said, I don't actually care where you score low. It is okay to be bad at things, with 2 exceptions. If your lowest scores are communicates powerfully and prolifically, or collaboration and teamwork, they must be improved every time. It does not matter what your job is. It does not matter your seniority level. If those are your lowest scores, they must be worked on. The reason for this is at some level, being low in those things will hold you back in any job. You have to collaborate. You have to be able to communicate. You have to have that executive presence. If you don't have those things, you are going to plateau, which is where most middle management gets stuck. Is their technical skills are high, their soft skills are low. If your soft skills are low, you will get stuck. And there was a point in my own career where my soft skills were, let's say, lacking. Okay. So a lot of the times you guys will ask me, what made you become a career coach? And it's because I did all of this stuff wrong. All right. I did not step out of the womb fully functioning in the corporate world, starting companies and excelling in my career. There were definitely points in my career where I learned that I did not have the soft skills I needed to be successful. And I had a leader that I worked with once, and I won't name him because I don't want to embarrass him, but I got a performance review back for that year. Everybody gave me glowing recommendations, right? I was a 5 out of 5, all this positive feedback, except for him. And his feedback was, people love working with you on projects because you get stuff done, but no one likes working with you. And I couldn't believe it. I had all of this positive feedback. My manager thought I was great. And yet I was getting this negative feedback. So I scheduled time with him and I was like, I need to know more about the feedback you're giving. And he said, do you know that people will call you the ice queen when you're not around? You are so focused on delivering results, so focused on getting things done that you don't take time to connect with the people you're working with or to hear out their opinions. And he's like, and I'm not saying you're wrong because everything you recommend ends up working, but it's very disenchanting to work with you because we don't feel like we're part of it. We feel like it's your show and we're just allowed to be there. And at the time, I had a really hard time digesting this feedback because it was so contrary to things that I had heard in my past when I was an individual contributor. Because when I'm working by myself, it has to be my decision. It has to be my idea. It has to be my plan. And so as I got more senior and I started to work with more groups, I didn't have that skill of collaborating effectively. And I am so thankful when I look back that he shared this feedback, because I went to a girlfriend of mine and went, I just don't understand. Like, what did I do wrong? What am I not doing? I think I'm open to feedback. I want collaboration, but I'm getting this feedback. And he was a leader I really respected. And so I knew he was telling me the truth. I didn't understand what that meant in my career. And she actually recommended me to a friend of hers. She's like, have coffee with this girl. She went through something similar. She'll be able to share her opinion. And I met with her and she goes, how often do you start calls with small talk? And I was like, well, never. I just get into the agenda. She's like, okay, that's the first problem. People don't want to be on a call with you if they don't know you at all. So like at least do a little bit of small talk at the beginning, smile, offer some personal details about yourself that will help people want to work with you more. And the second piece of advice she gave me was, what do you do when they question you? And I said, well, I want them to know that I did that. So I tell them that I did it. And she was like, yeah, no. Most people, when they're asking questions, they're not questioning you and your ability to execute. They're trying to understand. And you're not giving them enough information to bring them with you on your thought process. And for me, these 2 pieces of advice were so life altering, and they provided so much insight to me as to why collaboration was so important and where I was missing the mark. And this ended up building out some of the tools that I teach my clients in my tool set, one of which is acknowledge before you respond, right? If somebody asks you a question, say, that is such a great question. I appreciate you asking that. When I was working on this, my thought process was this. Does that make sense? Or, hey, I'm glad you brought that up. Can you tell me a little bit more where that question is coming from? That way I have context. I'm connecting with the individual rather than jumping straight into the defensive mode that I had historically saying, oh, no, I did that. Oh, no, don't ask me about that. I've already done it. Or, oh, I already thought about that idea. It won't work, which I felt was in defense of my work, but I later learned was shooting down their recommendations and their attempts to get involved. So collaboration, communication, they must be at least in the middle of the pack. If they're one of your spikes, congratulations. You are in the top 1%. And I very, very, very rarely see those skills as spikes. They tend to be more in the middle. If they're already high for you, that is amazing. And you have unlimited potential in your career. But if anything else is your low score, so for me, I rate really low on risk taking. Not a risk taker. It's not my jam. Some people would argue against that, but in general, it's really not where I shine. I'm okay with that being a low score. I just won't put myself in jobs where risk taking is a big part of success. But I'm great at drives for results. I'm great at analyzes problems and provide solutions. And in those situations, there are lots of jobs where I can apply those spikes in a way that's not only going to show my boss that I'm great at my job, but it's also going to differentiate me from my peers. And so this strength exercise is really, really key for that. So once you have your results, let's assume you're okay in communicating powerfully and prolifically, you're okay in collaborations and teamwork, and you have your 2 or 3 spikes. This is where you're going to want to build a personal brand on those strengths. That personal brand is going to be how you talk about yourself. It's how you want people to talk about you in a room where you're not present. And it's how you're going to continue to add value as your career progresses. Now, your brand may change over time as you learn new skills and as you develop, but generally, spikes will not. Right? It's very hard to make something that was middle of the pack a spike. It's much easier to make a spike spikier. Okay. So say you have my spikes, right? Delivers results, solution-oriented, and problem solving. When I talk about the work that I do, I say, hey, working on this project, it was really interesting. There was a lot of different work that we had to analyze. We were able to go in deep and find this potential solution. Post-implementation, we're finding that the results we've been able to drive forward are X, right? Woven in there are both of those spikes, both of those skills. When I talk about myself with my boss and they say, okay, what are you working on? Say, well, I've really been focused on driving results in this particular area. I want to make sure that we're analyzing all of the problems and proposing good solutions, but I really want to see some movement on that needle before the end of the year. Now I'm talking about my work in those same terms to my boss. When I join a new project, say, hey guys, I'm so glad to be here. I'm really here to help analyze some problems, help propose solutions, drive forward results. You guys let me know how I can help you with that. Now I've said it with this group. So with all of that language, we basically start to parrot what we hear, right? I keep using circle back as the example for that. 10 years ago, nobody said circle back, right? We have Jen Psaki for 4 years and all of a sudden everybody in the world is saying circle back, right? So language is addictive and we tend to repeat the things that we hear often. The same is true when we're talking about performance of individuals. If I say, I'm results oriented, I drive for results, and I like solving problems and analyzing issues, that's how everybody's going to talk about me. And then when I'm not in a room and they say, hey, this project's going off the rails, we're unable to get results, it's not moving forward. Well, somebody will go, well, if we need results, why don't we bring in Kendall? That word has triggered their memory of me and now I'm brought in. Or performance review time, when Kendall's name pops up on the board and they're evaluating me relative to my other peers, they go, well, what do people think about her? Someone will go, well, she does really deliver results. Somebody else goes, yeah, I've seen her solve a bunch of problems and propose some pretty great solutions this year. Somebody else goes, yeah, that's kind of the same read that I have on her. And suddenly everybody in the room agrees that that's what I'm good at. And then you have that cohesive message where everybody says, okay, great, where do we think that falls? So building your personal brand on your strengths is really key, because the most important conversations in your career will happen when you're not in the room. And so we'll talk a little bit about cross calibrations today. I know I've touched on this in other podcast episodes, but I want to make sure that it's very clear as it relates to your strengths. At the end of the year, when you are given your performance rating or go up for a potential promotion, most companies host what's called a cross calibration meeting. And what that means is it's all of the leaders at a certain level and above. So maybe that's director and above, maybe that's VP and above. It depends on your company. And they'll bring up the proposed scores by all of the managers. And they'll say, okay, great, let's look at all of the fives. Everybody who's supposed to get a 5 based on their managers, let's look at them. And they'll say, okay, well, if we look at these people, who doesn't fit? Who's not quite at that 5 level? Who do we look at and we think, oh, they didn't quite do enough? And somebody may say, oh, well, Kendall did a lot of good work, but not quite like Steve and Jacob. Like, she just didn't quite hit that mark. And people will nod their head and they'll go, okay, we're going to move Kendall to a 4. Great. Anybody else? And then they'll look at all the 4s and they'll go, okay, if Kendall is the baseline for a 4, because we moved her down from 5, who can't hang with Kendall? I'll say, oh, well, Susie didn't quite get there. Great. Susie's now a 3, right? So this is how that exercise is done. It's not a popularity contest. It's not who likes you, but you have to have voices in that room who think you're great, who will advocate for you. And you want the people in that room to understand what you're good at and feel like you're performing at a certain level. So when you go into those cross-calibration conversations, there's always a few outliers, right? People who maybe they don't quite fit in their group or they have a very different function. There was a stage in my career where my strength in solving problems is very operational, very tactical, all right? You don't bring me in to do detailed numerical analysis. You bring me in to solve problems. And I was in a role with a lot of other detail-oriented analysts. And comparison, they're like, well, it's hard. What Kendall does is so different than everybody else. So how do you compare them? And it was a constant struggle to advocate for myself because I wasn't given those projects to prove I could anyways. I was doing these projects where I really shined. And yet, in those cross-calibration meetings, it's hard to compare me to my peers. So when you think of building your personal brand, you identify your strengths, you articulate your language, then you build out your network. Who are the people who are going to be in those rooms when you're not, who you want in your camp? Right? I have a good friend who's another coach who just published a book, and she talks about building your sales team. Who is going to go out and sell you to other people when you're not around? So one of those people should be your boss. All right. If you have a horrible boss, I'm so sorry. I know that's the biggest struggle, and you probably want to quit your job every single day. You have to get your boss in your camp. If you cannot do that with your current boss, you need a different boss. Secondarily, you should have a relationship with your skip level, which is your boss's boss. Imagine you skipped over them. Boss's boss. Okay. You need a relationship with them because there will be rooms where your manager is not present and you need representation. The easiest pathway to that is your skip level, right? I meet with my skip level twice a week, 3 times a week. Not necessarily one-on-one. Some of those are in group settings, but have a really strong relationship with my skip because I know there are conversations that take place that I'm not in that room. Now, I'm also senior enough that at my level, I also have meetings with my skip's peers on at least a quarterly basis to make sure that they know who I am, that I have a relationship with them, that they would be willing to advocate for me. Depending on your company and how it's structured, and depending on your organization, that may not be feasible to have relationships with your skip's peers. But you should at least have a relationship with your manager, your manager's peers, and your skip level. There's an exercise that I do in my program where we talk about an influencer list. Who are the people who have the most power in your organization, and how do they really advocate for individuals, and who do you need to build relationships with? And that goes a little more in depth into this and probably could be its own podcast episode. But at a minimum, when you think of building your personal brand, think about who are the people around you who have influence, who have a say, who have seniority that you want in your camp. This does not mean be inauthentic and fake and gross. Okay. So if there's somebody in your organization who you hate and they have a lot of power, I am not saying go get coffee with them 5 times a week. That would be exhausting mentally and emotionally, and it would not honestly benefit you very much. I would instead focus on who are the people who you really like, who you think really highly of, and how do you build good relationships with them? Because those relationships will help you strengthen your strengths, but also help you build those advocates for you when you think about cross calibration. You think about new projects being assigned. You think about scope of influence. You want those people in your side. The best way that I have found in my career to really build relationships with those people is to figure out something they're good at and ask them to teach you. Are they great at communication? Are they great at technical expertise? Do they influence a room really well? Do they have great executive presence? Do they make beautiful slides? Pick something that they are good at and ask them to teach that to you. Studies have shown that we actually feel more fondly about people we help than people who help us. Give them an opportunity to help you. A lot of people to me will say, well, they're so busy. I don't want to have a drain on their time. I feel like it's inappropriate. And in some companies it is, depending on your hierarchy. But I would say is every company that I've ever worked at where I have done this and gone to them and said, hey, I've heard you're great at this. Would you mind meeting with me once a quarter and just sharing some wisdom? Nobody has ever said no. So pick who you want to invest your time in, be intentional with this, and go in prepared with your brand to represent yourself well and to glean as much knowledge from them as you can. I hope this helps you guys really understand your strengths and how to apply them to your career and use them for your career progression. As always, I'm Kendall, that career coach, happy to help share some of the secrets of the corporate game, and tune in next week.